food has become very transactional. People are so hung up on what's the price of this versus this. They are not focused on why this costs this much, where's this coming from, or how it makes you feel.
Welcome to Load Startup. I'm your host, Pat Killoran, and I'm on a mission to highlight business owners of all shapes and sizes who are doing incredible things right here in our backyard of Austin. All right, I am super excited about our next guest. Tavel Bristol-Joseph is an award-winning chef who was just recently a finalist for the prestigious James Beard Award. He's part owner of Emmer Rye Hospitality Group that owns some of Austin's best restaurants, including Hestia, Canje, and the one that started it all, Emmer Rye. But Tavel's not measuring his success by the awards or the number of restaurants he opens. As you'll hear from him today, he's on a mission to touch the lives of as many people as possible. Whether it's through his scholarship for aspiring chefs at ACC or working with vendors from his hometown in Guyana, he hopes to connect people through delicious food and unforgettable experiences. We kick things off today talking about Tavel's latest restaurant concept in San Antonio, Nicosi, a dessert bar that makes dessert the main attraction and bans cell phones. Something I'm actually a big fan of. Like a lot of us, I have an addiction to my phone, and sometimes we need a reminder to be present. Put our phones away, and let chefs be the storytellers of our evening. This is the story behind Tavel.
Yeah, Nicosi is my middle name.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah. And the reason why I wanted to name it Nicosi is because I think that, I know, typically when you go to a restaurant, you go and desserts is an option. Mm-hmm. Right? You normally go for the savory food. Mm-hmm. If there's an amazing pastry chef there, you say, I can't leave without getting desserts.
Yeah.
But you don't go for the dessert,
right?
You go for the food, the atmosphere, the vibe, and all of that.
Yep.
Very similar to your middle name, right? You have a choice in when you say it or not. Sometimes your closest friend, you don't even know their middle names because it's this choice in whether I want to say it or not. So if I can combine those two things, that is a choice, and make it the thing that you cannot miss, then that's why, to me, it made sense. A dessert bar and a middle name came together, and that's how Nicosi was born. And amazing. I also thought about that concept since I was like 17 years old. So the name, the idea, the concept, the design, every aspect of that.
Yeah, because that's a bold move, right, in the space. And are there many like you do kind of an omakase style, right? Where it's very intimate. You have the 8+ courses.
Yes.
Are there many chefs kind of doing that right now and experimenting with that?
No, you normally find that in the sushi world, right?
Yeah.
You don't find that in the dessert world.
Yeah.
And when I experienced that dessert bar, which was called Room 4 Dessert in New York City, when I experienced it, it was you came up and you ordered. And they were really focused on textures and temperatures. And initially I wanted it to be that. But as I traveled and had different experiences, I realized that food has become very transactional now, where people are so hung up on what's the price of this versus this, right?
Yeah.
And not a lot of people, they are not focused on why this costs this much and why does this cost this much and where's this coming from,
right?
And so or how it makes you feel, right? So if we're able to break that apart a little bit and let food be more of something of deeper meaning versus this transactional thing, then we're able to make a difference in this world. Yeah. So with Nicosi, it was that let's take away all transactions. So your dietary restrictions, all of those things, we're going to get that information before you walk in the door. So when you're here, we don't have to do any transaction. You're just enjoying the experience.
Right. Right.
And that's how we want to look at food, us as an organization too. That's how we also want to look at food in general. That's why we did the market, Puma Market. Like all of those steps we're taking is to making a bigger difference in our society.
I love that. And you said you had kind of this idea when you were 17 of like more of a dessert-centered, focused experience.
Yeah.
So 17, was that when you were in New York? You had moved to New York?
Yes. 17 is when I moved to New York, Brooklyn, to be with my mom, my brother, my sister, and the rest of my family too. Mm-hmm. And then I started New York restaurant school at that time. And while I was going to school, my last 6 months of culinary school, I started working at the River Cafe.
Gotcha.
And at that point, the chef that was there, this guy Francisco, he moved around. He was at the French Laundry. He was the Modernist, and now he's the pastry chef in Noma, Copenhagen. But he's the one that was like, hey, young kid, you seem excited about this. Mm-hmm. You should go check out this restaurant.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, cool. I mean, broke as hell, barely enough money to purchase what I was there for. Yeah. But it was a life-changing experience in that moment. Like, it set me on the trajectory in the way I'm at today.
You went into school as pastry specific, right? Kind of focused on being a pastry chef.
Yeah.
And was that mainly because you had so much experience like baking as a kid with your aunt? Is that kind of the main reason you were like, I know I'm pretty good at this. Like, let me see if I can kind of fine tune those pastry skills. Is that kind of why you decided to focus on that? Or
I mean, listen, honestly, I am addicted to sweet. Right? I love sugar. And I've been that way since I was a kid. Yeah. So I love food. But I'm more in love with sugar.
Yeah.
And anything that was involved in that, I wanted to be a part of it.
Yep.
I had the skills and the know-how to cook savory, but desserts was just my passion. So baking with my aunt, it was a lot of pound cakes and cookies and rum cakes.
Yeah.
Fruit cakes. So I was in the kitchen with her going through that process and it was just something that I connected with really well. But I've always just it's interesting because at first I thought that was my passion, but I think that is just what I'm good at.
Yeah.
Right? I'm really good at that.
Yeah.
Hospitality is my passion. Making people feel good around me. Creating an environment that people can be themselves or the best version of themselves.
Yeah.
That's my passion.
Right. I love that. And we talked a little bit about trying to check off, your passion, what you're good at, right? And kind of your job and what you do for a living. And it sounded like back then when you were a kid, it was kind of cooking and also basketball was a big passion of yours, which
of course.
was for me as well. I assume you kind of grew up in the 90s basketball era, right?
The Jordan
NBA
era.
And the Jordan era. I grew up in Orlando, so Shaquille and Penny and all those guys were my idols. And I too wanted to play in the NBA until I stopped growing and realized that was not going to happen. But you kind of, when you moved to New York, you were still into basketball, right? And I'm sure playing in Brooklyn was a fierce competition.
Oh my God, man! Yes.
Did you go from like being the top guy in Guyana with your group of friends to being like humbled by the
because so there wasn't a lot of I was one of the tallest people. I'm 6'5".
Yeah.
I was one of the tallest people in my school. So I didn't have a problem getting on the court. No problem. Everybody wants me on the team.
Right.
And when I came to the U.S., it was different. I mean, those guys in Brooklyn, it's like a lifestyle. They don't even make it to the NBA. They just love playing that much.
Yeah.
And I remember, like, honestly, my mom, we lived like right around the corner from the park. So I was like, Mom, I want to go play some ball. And she was like, yeah, I'll come with you. She had nothing to do that day. And it was like, I can't even remember. I think it was like a Saturday or a Sunday. And everybody is outside playing. And that's what it is. Like, summertime in Brooklyn, everybody's outside. People are picnicking in parks. They're walking. It's an activity. So
those courts by the water in Brooklyn, I used to play on.
Oh, really?
Oh, man, those were some wild games.
Yeah. I was in Cypress Hills over there. So I lived in East New York, which is right on the border of Brooklyn and Queens. You're right there by Jamaica Avenue. Mm-hmm. So like Harlem Park, that was the name of the park that I lived around the corner from. And we go out there and the park is full. A lot of people are there. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, okay, cool. And I remember seeing these guys like, yo, we want to pick up one. And I'm like, bet, right away I'm in. And my mother sat on the bench for a while. And I go in the game. I'm feeling good by myself. And I think I was just trying to do too much. Yeah. Because, one, my mother's never seen me play basketball before. Mm-hmm. So just knowing that she was there already freaked me out a little bit. Also, I didn't really understand the lingo and the moves and all of that and where I was. See, I'm making a ton of excuses. So
it wasn't your best game.
It was my best game, man. So you know where this is heading.
Yeah.
So I was like, cool, I'm just gonna like freaking go for it. So I'm trying to do all the moves that I think, and it was a terrible game, man. I got beat up. So I got back. I got out the game. Half the team pissed at me. I got back and I sit next to my mom. Like, what do you think? She was like, well, I think you need to go to culinary school. That's what I think. I was like, you're probably right. And then she's like, yeah, I'm signing you up. I already made the decision already. So that's how she signed me up to go to New York restaurant school.
Yeah.
And she also knew like I was, because coming from Guyana, I was in home economics, which was part of a culinary program in high school in Guyana. So it made sense for me to make that transition and continue my studies.
Right. And I'm sure, and I think I've read that it was an explosion of kind of cuisine for you too, being in New York, like having access to all this incredible different variety of different cultures and foods. Did that like further just like get you excited about food in general? Like were you just like, did New York kind of blow your mind in terms of like just the food scene that is New York?
Absolutely. I mean, I think what blew my mind more is the access to things that I only saw on TV that never had the opportunity, like grapes. Never had it until I came.
Oh, yeah.
Strawberries. Yeah. Never had it until we came. Right? Because like most of those fruits that don't go in the Caribbean, you do not get that.
Right.
Now there's apples in Guyana, but when I was growing up, we had no apples and stuff like that. Everything was different. So it was really interesting to be able to taste those things, vegetables, herbs. There was so much more on the spectrum that, you know, the common things that like sage that we normally use here, that it's like, sage, of course. Everybody knows that.
Yeah.
That's not something that I grew up with.
Right.
Right. So having access to those things was like, that to me was the mind blowing. So I wanted to taste everything. You know, at that point. Yeah. Because I wanted to kind of like, my brain said, you got to catch up, right?
Sure,
because if you want to compete, then you need to got the history.
Yeah.
And
truncating all this experience into a smaller window.
Exactly. Yeah. So, but I still had those, like if you speak to most Caribbean people, it's like we grew up a certain way. Our foods are cooked a certain way. Like we're not eating rare meats. Everything is well done. Stews. We don't eat oysters, things of that nature.
Yeah.
So it was also adjusting of culture at the same time on like, okay, well, how can I know what something tastes like if my brain said, I don't eat that.
Right.
I don't touch that. So it was modernizing yourself in a sense.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And on the flip side, so you obviously maybe figured out that basketball wasn't your path, and then you go down the cooking restaurant school path. Was there a point maybe during restaurant school or maybe at River Cafe right out the gates where you kind of realized, okay, I'm pretty good at this? Like where you got some maybe, I don't know, positive reviews, or you did something that maybe surprised yourself or others. Like, was there ever moments like kind of early on in your cooking career where you kind of realized, I think I'm like, this could be a really big talent for me?
Right. Honestly, though, to be honest, those moments come from your family, because my family pretty honest. I just told you about my mom.
Yeah.
Very honest. They will let you know. And they won't, sometimes they're rude about it, but sometimes they're like, what they don't say is what is the answer, right? Mm-hmm. So, if my brother says something like, that's good, I know what that means.
Yeah.
And when you make something and they're like, oh, yo, you got any more of this? That's when you know you hit it, right? So I was able to, I knew how good I was based on the response. Because when I moved to Brooklyn, we lived in a family house. Mm-hmm. So every floor had a different family. My uncles live upstairs.
Yeah.
My aunt lived on the second floor. My mother lived on, then we had the basement. So it was like 4 stories and every different is a family. So we all under the same umbrella. Mm-hmm. So when you cook, you're cooking for like 12, 13 people.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
And we're all just kind of like coming down to each floor and you know what I mean, being a part of something. So when I was like making cakes or something like that, I would run it upstairs and let my auntie try it or something like that.
Yeah.
And they would give you the real response.
Yep.
And then I had that moment when I was in culinary school, when I was at the New York Restaurant School, just like being in the class and being like knowing things, being a little bit more ahead, being able to finesse things better than the other students in my class. That's how I knew, like, okay, I believe in myself.
I know what I'm doing here.
Enough to do this thing. Yeah. And just kind of continued on that path on where we were able to, like, working in groups and automatically everyone is like, so what do you think we should do? Mm-hmm. That natural instinct. It gave me a lot of confidence.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask that. I guess it's a good point to ask this. So, and I think I'd sent you that like analogy, right? Of like Kobe Bryant is obviously a great player who has a lot of skill, who's just kind of naturally talented, but also has an incredible work ethic, right? And it kind of is known for hitting the gym hours and hours and that, so much practice every day. Like, what is the equivalent of that in the chef's world? Like, how can you, now having so much experience as a chef, how can you spot raw talent and maybe somebody that's starting out their career as a chef, and how do you elevate that skill set through like hours through jump shots, right? Like, what is the equivalent of that for a chef? What does that look like?
Very good question, and it's interesting that you use Kobe because that's my favorite player.
I knew that. Yeah.
So the natural talent, like first, natural talent to me is just a love and a passion for something. And if you love it enough, you're going to do the work to understand it. And that's where it starts, right? Because unless there's a competition, there's no true definition of what that is, right? Because someone can be really good at Caribbean food and you put them in a French restaurant and they cannot stand. Or someone that's really good at French cooking, you put them in a Caribbean restaurant, they cannot hold weight. So that natural talent, it all depends on a lot of things. Yeah. The passion to want to learn and grow, that's the natural that we look at.
Yeah.
And how we measure that and how you improve on that scale is taste. You have to taste everything. Whatever is around you. When you go to the grocery store, when you go to a farm, the leaves of something. When you walk up on a new ingredient, checking that out, going to the Asian markets, tasting things. Because what tasting things does is you're creating this library in your mind subconsciously that when you do sit down to write a menu or create a dish, your brain is automatically running through these flavors that you've had in your past since childhood. your brain is working, thinking about all these things. So when you say, "Oh man, I have persimmons," right, and you know the taste and the flavor that persimmons give you, then your brain goes to, okay, what can I add to this flavor profile? What have I tried this one time all the way back?
Yeah.
Or it could be something simple as persimmons. Ooh, well, persimmon is a lot more sugar cane vibes. Okay, cool. So vanilla works really well with that. And you're able to like lean into certain flavor profiles that way. So what's practice for us is tasting and enjoying different ingredients and going to different restaurants and looking and seeing different techniques that other chefs are using to be able to figure out how you can put that in your repertoire. And the other thing is, how do you recognize that and elevate that? If someone walks in the door and they have a passion for cooking and they have a passion for creating, great. There's a lot of people that have a passion for it, but there's also different layers in this, because you can love cooking and you can be a prep person where you come in and you just love making the big batches and you love making the big sauces and stuff like that. And then there's the cooks that are like, I just want to plate nice things. I just want to do the techniques, right? I want to learn how to sous vide this thing perfectly. And so their passion is not the big batch cooking.
Right.
Their passion is more on how to plate. They love the art side of the cooking world. And they love to make things look pretty. So our job is now to, because we can't put it all in one box. You got to kind of like look at an individual, work with an individual, and then pull out what they're good at and help them to kind of tap into that.
Yeah. No, I love that explanation of how that symphony works of getting the right people in the right spots. Because, the equivalent in my career was, there was always a book about scaling a tech company, and it was all about like how to get the right people in the right seats on the bus, right? We're all in the same bus, we're going the same direction, but you might have people in the wrong seats. You got to move them around and to make sure that there's the right harmony of people doing the job they should be doing, right? And that's kind of the equivalent of what you're talking about there. Like you're kind of seeing people, what they're good at, observing their skills, making sure they're moving in a direction that's going to, amplify what they're good at and their talents. And I want to go back a little bit though. So, you went to River Cafe, you spent some time at Bluefin, W Hotel, Times Square, and then you went out to Tucson, where you met Kevin. What prompted that? And then can you talk a little bit about how that relationship formed with Kevin?
Yeah. So what prompted that was a relationship that I was in at the time that made me move out to Tucson. And for me, it was a relationship, but it was also me wanting to see the world in a sense. I wanted to explore more. Being in New York, I felt great, but the thing with New York what it did to me, it was that as busy as we were, as much family that I had around me and the support system, all of those things were great. But I still felt alone in a sense because it's so big, so massive that you become invisible. And your sense of appreciation for the simple things fade. It's always more, bigger, better. Right,
sure.
Like that's what that's the circle I was a part of. Well, how much more money we can get? How much more? And if you had like a nice thing, like people constantly was like, yeah, that's cool. Little thing, that's fine. I mean, getting my first car, I'm like all excited, and my friends are like, "Yeah, it's not a Beamer though." Like, and you're like, "Yeah, it's a Ford Explorer." But
bar's high.
Right? They're like, "Yeah, it's fine." So there was just this level in which I just didn't appreciate the things that I had, and I always, after all the noise was over, I was still feeling very alone. So I just wanted to be in a space where it was more slow down, breathe, and see the qualities and the fruits of your labor. I wanted to see that, and that's why moving out to Tucson, I felt more comfortable making that shift. And then when I got out there, I started working for Fox Restaurant Concepts, and then I started working for Market Restaurant Group, which is where I met Kevin because a friend of mine was the corporate chef. I came in as the pastry corporate, and Kevin was the director of operations. So us three together ran 4 restaurant concepts. And we were communicating a lot and working on how we can make this thing better, bigger, trying to shift the food culture in Tucson the best possible way. But when you don't own this but so far you can push because you're dealing in a town that to me it was like it's a couple steps back from New York. No disrespect to it, but it's just not there. And how do you say, hey, this is the new thing, we got to get up to date with it, with a bunch of people that's retired, and they're like, we kind of just want our regular happy hour. The fermentation stuff y'all doing is real cool, but we really don't
hard
care
to
about
innovate
that.
there, and
it's so hard to innovate. So me and Kevin, we started having more and more of a friendship, more than business, because we shared some of the same values and goals in life on wanting to be a better steward for food and culture. So after building that, we just became friends and we worked there. And then he was thinking about possibly doing something, wanting to do his own. And he's like, I'm looking for a business partner. And that's how we kind of started talking about projects moving forward.
Yeah, that's awesome. What do you think, is there anything in particular that, you learned from him? And did you guys have different kind of contrasting styles, or is there anything?
100% different.
Okay. Well, I know he's the savory guy, right? And obviously, in terms of what you guys cook,
he's white,
totally
I'm black.
Yeah.
It's completely different.
Yeah. Brothers from another mother. What do you think you learned maybe about his style that you liked when you guys first, that made it such a nice harmony? What? Yeah.
What I really appreciated was his die-hard passion for food and learning about food. That was it's very inspiring. His entrepreneurial mind was also very inspiring because when you come from where I come from, entrepreneurship is something, it feels so far away. Right?
Yeah.
And when you're talking to somebody that's like, no, it's right there, you can touch it, and you're like, I can. It's like that, right? That was the effect for me. It was, my dreams now became way more of a sooner reality than a later reality.
Yeah.
And those are the people that you want to have in your life that helps you to understand and be more confident and forward thinking than most. So that was a couple of the elements, and then is loyalty to friendship also.
Yeah.
Because outside of that, I wouldn't have worked or thought about being a business partner with Kevin if we weren't friends. I wouldn't have thought about that, because to me that is, I want to be able to work with people that I'm excited to be around. I don't care how much money we make together. If we cannot be friends and we cannot be in the same space for a long period of time, it means nothing to me.
Yeah. And then you moved to Austin in 2015. What was your initial impression of Austin when you moved here?
So before, I'll tell you this story. Before I moved to Austin, Actually, I already made the decision that I'm moving to Austin, and
Because you guys were both going all in on Emmer and Rye.
going all in
Right.
on Emmer Rye. Putting every single penny we have into this space. And I'm driving, and I was like, wait a second. I don't even know if there's any black people, because I never lived in Austin before. I never visited Austin before.
Mm-hmm.
So I called Kevin. I said, hey, man, I got a quick question for you. Is there any black people in Austin? Because I don't even know. I just agreed to move out here. He's like, there's not a lot, but there's some. I was like, it's just checking. It's a thought in my mind. Because every time you think of Texas, you think about tumbleweeds and cowboys. And, you don't know, which is so interesting. Like, now Austin is, like, on the map, right? But before, and even some people in New York, when you tell them Texas, they are like, what? Like, they don't think about technology. They do not
There's
think.
a stereotype for sure.
It's 100% stereotype for Texas, right? So when I got out here, what I noticed was it was the perfect blend between New York City and Tucson, Arizona, right? Where you have the young professionals that's hustling and bustling, that's pushing forward technology, food, whatever you're into, music. They're pushing that narrative, but yet still you can leave that and go have a quality of life, right? You can get in after being downtown in the push, get in your car, drive 10, 15 minutes into your beautiful home, relax with your family.
Yep. You
don't get that in those two cities.
Right. Yeah.
In New York, you leave, but you go to an apartment with a whole bunch of people in it.
Yeah.
Right? And in Tucson, you're going to get the quality of life, but the push ain't there.
Hustle and bustle there, yeah.
So Austin gave me both, which was much appreciated. And it was actually what I was looking for.
Right, yeah. And I think I read, because it obviously probably inspired Canje, but there wasn't a lot of Caribbean food when you first got to Austin either, right? Maybe a couple food trucks. But how long was the idea of Canje in your head when you got to Austin? Was it always something that eventually would be a dream restaurant for you?
No. That concept started up when I moved here.
Okay.
And I was because when you move to a space, any space, you look to find your identity within that city, country. And, Google was my best friend. I'm like, where can I find Caribbean food? And when I saw, like, these food trucks and stuff, I was like, wow. Like, there isn't, like, if I want to take my wife someplace and say, this is my culture.
Yeah.
Where can I take her? I got to go to a different. That's crazy to me.
Yeah.
Right. So that's where that sparked of maybe there's an opportunity for me to be able to do something that showcase, because doing it in the dessert realm is not it, because there's not that much desserts that are coming out of the Caribbean. When we talk about, elevated desserts. So I knew that opening a dessert bar is not going to be the thing.
Yeah.
We're not going to do a Caribbean dessert bar.
Yep.
So thinking about what is that next step, I was like, okay, well, maybe one day I'll do a Caribbean restaurant. Maybe one day. Again, it was a dream I thought that's like, I could do this one day.
Yeah.
And that was it when that happened. Fast forward, COVID happened. And just before COVID, I'm starting to think a little bit more. It was just before COVID, I was starting to think like, okay, there is some opportunities here that I could open up a spot, because we're starting to open up more restaurants at that point. When I came here, just to give you some backstory, when I came here, it was just to open up Emmer and Rye and possibly do one more restaurant, which was going to be my dessert bar That was
Okay.
that was the plan.
Yeah.
We're gonna do 2 concepts.
Yep.
I'm gonna help you, Kev, get your stuff rolling. You're gonna help me get my thing rolling, and we're good.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Turned into a lot more than that.
Yeah, right. And then opportunities started to show up.
Yeah.
Just before COVID, I got the call from Food and Wine saying that you're one of the best new chefs, which was crazy to me because they've never given a pastry chef that award in 35 years of that magazine being alive.
Wow.
Never, ever a pastry chef has been in any of those pages. So I was like, wow, like this is a big deal. And I want to make the biggest impact that I possibly can utilizing this platform.
Yeah.
So that thing that was far away now became a little bit closer to me.
Yeah.
Because now I'm like, oh, I can actually do this.
Right.
So then you get hype, right? You know,
Yeah.
I'm like, now I go to my business partners. I'm like, all right, guys, this is what I'm thinking. So now, Canje became this thing that I was like, okay, now this is a great opportunity and this is a great moment to be able to launch something after getting this award. Didn't know COVID was coming. And then that happened.
Gotcha.
So in that time frame is also when, because we knew 6 months before they announced it, right? So I had to hold that secret, but also...
Oh, you knew the award.
Yeah.
I thought you were talking about COVID. I was like,
no.
We knew.
We knew
the knowledge, man.
Yeah, we knew the award was coming before,
Gotcha.
right?
Yeah.
So you're holding that, not 6 months, I think it's like 4 months.
Yeah.
You're holding this thing. You're like, yo, I want something big and it's going to get announced.
Yeah.
And then COVID happened. And then it's like, holy shit. So this whole thing now becomes nothing.
Yeah.
Right? But it got announced. It got some buzz. I was like, okay, cool. So now I got this platform. And there was 2 things I always wanted to do. One, I wanted to start a scholarship. So I started the Bristol-Joseph Culinary Scholarship,
Cool.
where we sponsor 2 students a year with ACC. And we pay for schooling, and we pay for, and then I offer mentorship, lifetime mentorship. So every single person is able to call me. We can talk about business. I can help place you in different places.
Yeah.
All that. You cannot work for me because it's illegal to pay for someone's schooling and have them work for you. So it's great for us to be able to create amazing chefs and then put them out into the society to be great.
Yeah.
So
awesome.
I started that, and then Canje was like, okay, we got to do this thing.
Yeah.
I didn't want to do a Guyanese restaurant because I think that it's too on the nose, and also it limits you. And it also creates a lot of argument. Like, well, that's not Guyanese. That's actually Trinidadian, but Guyanese stole it. Like, I didn't want to have that conversation with no one.
Gotcha.
So I said, let me just do a Caribbean restaurant. So anything from, it can be Haiti, it could be Trinidad, it could be, St. Vincent, St. Lucia, all of those. Anyone we represent, all part of the Caribbean culture. And it gives us the opportunity to switch things out when we want to and really, dig deep into these different countries and highlight dishes that people would never heard of or would even try a dish from that place. And that's how kind of like Canje was born. And not born because it was born when I thought about it, but it started to mature right as soon as COVID started.
Yeah.
And then we just started to think about ways. And throughout COVID, we were like, looking at spaces and talking about it and putting together the boards and what we wanted to look and feel like and all of those things.
And then it opened in 2021, right?
Yeah.
Gotcha. And then I think I read, right, you took the whole team to Guyana before it opened.
Yeah.
What were some of the highlights of that? Obviously, I'd imagine you wanted to do it, right, to immerse your whole team in kind of the culture and kind of the touch and feel, on the ground, the foods and the cuisine and everything. But like, what were some of the more, like when you look back at that trip, why was that so important for you to do at that
Yeah,
time?
well, what was important was it definitely wasn't for the food,
Okay.
right? I'll just put that out there now.
Yeah.
Because, and again, we're professional chefs.
Mm-hmm.
We should be able to elevate anything and make it better
Yeah.
in our perspective, right? The food that my mother makes is delicious. And I don't think anyone in this country can make it as good as my mother makes it. But I don't want to go pay for that, right?
Yeah.
I'm happy with what my mother makes at home. I'm not going to go pay for it.
Right.
If I'm going to pay for it, it has to have a different element, a different level to it, right?
Yeah.
So with and my whole team, it's a bunch of professional chefs.
Yeah.
With years of experience and training. So I expect to go there and taste good food, but I expect us to make a better version of it.
Mm-hmm.
So when we went, the whole goal for me was, how do I get my business partners to tap into culture and understand what that means when I say the word. Mm-hmm. What does that mean? Because we all have different interpretation of what culture is. And when we talk about hospitality, I can talk all day about when you go to a space and how people treat you and how you're supposed to feel, and we can talk all day about it, but unless you are there in that country and you see those people and you see the struggles and you see the successes and you see how they both work together.
Yeah.
That to me was something that was really important.
Yeah.
For the team to experience.
Yeah.
And being able to go to different parts of the country and give back. Right? Because we are going there to spend our own money. So we're going to give back to the community, and we're also taking inspiration from that community. And I didn't want to just take inspiration and not give anything back.
Right.
So me taking the team down there was also giving back to the community.
Yeah.
All those local vendors, everyone got paid, right?
Yeah.
So we were able to go and enjoy ourselves and be around people and see what the music felt like and how welcoming people were and things of that nature. And then, let's go try some good food around.
Yeah.
And then we know we are going to be able to make a better version of it.
Right.
Not being cocky about it, but you just know that.
Yeah.
Great. And then, so that's what's the purpose of of that trip, was to go to experience it.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. And I think I told you, my wife and I went to Canje, I think it was like 2 weeks ago, first time, and it was incredible. I wanted to go to the restaurant before we sat down and chatted, and I love ceviche, but that ceviche is the best I've ever had, hands down. That was so good. And I know you guys have a lot of dishes that are super popular on the menu, but when we go back to where we started today's chat with kind of storytelling, I'm sure a lot of the dishes have a great story at Canje. What are the ones that you think are the most meaningful for you? Like which dishes have the best or the most, biggest story in your eyes?
The pepper pot for sure. That one has a it's a national dish of Guyana. And I grew up eating that dish only at Christmas time. That's the only time you eat that dish in the Caribbean. One, because it's a lot of meat in that dish, and it's a meat stew essentially.
Yeah. And
you don't have meat available like that unless you got money like that. So to be able to, so there's families that are saving up to be able to make that dish so you can enjoy. And that's how I grew up. Like, we save up to make that dish.
Yeah.
And you eat it for 4 days.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Yeah.
And because grandma made a big pot, and every day we all eat that, right?
Yeah.
So that's a dish that just have this core deep meaning to me.
Yeah.
The other part of it that's really special is the first time I've ever had cash rib. Cash rib it's similar to like molasses, but it's made with taro root. We call it cassava root.
Okay.
and they juice it, and then they reduce it with herbs and spices, and they add a little bit of sugar to it.
Yeah.
So it becomes this dark, sticky thing, and that's what makes the stew so dark. So you marinate the meat in that with your different seasonings. You sear it, and then you cook it, and you add some more cashew to that stock. So it's this dark, rich stew.
Yeah.
That cashew, the first time I've ever had it was when my aunt in Guyana, they used to make it in a little factory that they had in the back, and she used to sell it to like people in the village. So I remember being a kid and tasting that, and what I did was reach out. She passed away, but her daughter still makes it. So I reached out to her, and we buy it. Her daughter makes it, and we buy it from her and ship it from Guyana to Austin.
Oh, my gosh. That's
right.
incredible.
So that is the storyline. And again, we're giving back to the community there, right? And so we buy it directly from Guyana. Whatever it costs, I don't negotiate.
Yeah.
We ship it, and we bring it here.
Wow, that's awesome.
And then the other aspect that makes that dish is that wild boar is an invasive species in Texas. So we have people trapping these boars for us and bringing it. So using wild boar there, it ties it to Texas and where we are.
Yeah.
So that dish really tells the story from me as a kid, Guyana culture, family, national dish.
Yeah.
Texas.
Full circle.
At Canje.
Yeah.
That's one of the dishes that I think it's really special.
Yeah.
And then we do jerk chicken, and it's spicy.
I had it. It was great.
Yeah, right. Incredible. But what makes our difference is that we ferment our jerk seasoning, right? Most people don't. We ferment it for about 30 days. So we have a batch of jerk that we started since the restaurant opened, and we'll take portions. So when you make the jerk seasoning, you take half of the old batch, you fold it into the new batch, and then you let that sit, and then you use the old batch, and that's how that process keeps going, so that you're always having this fermented and what the fermentation does is it just kind of grounds all the ingredients and make it more balanced, and you don't have like these high notes of thyme and onions and garlic. Yeah. You don't have these high notes in your flavor profile. It kind of stays neutral, and it has this consistent flavor profile that you show up with, which is a Japanese culture. That learning how to, learning about these different cultures, I was able to fold that into what we do in the Caribbean as a part of our Caribbean culture.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. You do such a great job there. I loved everything we had. Was absolutely incredible. I think we missed the pepper pot. We were between that and we did the curry, which was out of this world. But we're gonna go back and get that one.
You have to.
Look, I could talk to you for hours. I don't want to take too much. I know you're busy, man. But I guess last question. There was some other ones, but maybe I'll follow up and we'll do a little blog post. But what is next? I mean, you did Nicosi. Obviously, is already gotten recommended by the Michelin Guide, right? And that's been a success. Is there anything in the future that you're super excited about that people might not know about that's kind of coming soon for you, or any other passion projects?
Yeah, well, man, are you trying to get me to spill the beans? We're always looking at new projects.
Anything you can say, I guess.
We're always looking at new things to expand. I want to expand Canje in a different market. I want to expand Hestia in a different market. When I say different market, I mean a different state or different country. Okay. We'll see.
Yeah.
We want to expand Pullman market in San Antonio because we believe that is such a space that really represents culture and a city. Yeah. And being able to source locally and have a space that represents a city in the way that it has and the way it showed up in San Antonio. We think that we can take that to different cities and do the same thing, kind of like what Italy did. Although they did it for Italian culture and Italian food. I think that we can do that. That represents every city. There's their food culture and sustainability and how that works. And I feel like we can take that and put it in Philly or put it in Dallas and be able to pull from those areas and create something really special.
Yeah.
So we want to expand that a bit.
Nice.
And my big audacious goal, I want to get into the hotel business. I think that, hospitality spans not just within the four walls of a restaurant. And when we're thinking about how can we extend the hospitality arm, I think that there is room in that space that we can kind of tap into at some point.
Yeah. Exciting.
I don't know when.
That'd be cool, yeah.
But that's the goal, because I think that's the closest thing to a restaurant.
Yeah.
Because every hotel has a restaurant, so it just makes sense.
Yep. Yeah. Well, awesome. I know you got to get going. That's really all I got for you today, man. This has been such a pleasure talking to you. I think you have such a cool journey you've been on, and I think the common thread of just like trying to, make your dream, envision that and just keep going, and different opportunities will come knocking, and you've done a great job of just staying the course and trying new things, being creative, and letting that guide your way. And so I really appreciate it.
Thank you, man. Story, Thank you. I mean, and the core of it is, man, it's not rocket science. Like, the beauty of success is not the physical things that you get out of it. It's the doors that open, right? And when the doors open and you're able to see opportunities, or you're able to see dreams that can actually be reality, and taking advantage of those things. Yeah, that's where, to me, that's the beauty of success. Yeah. And that's what I'm constantly looking for. I'm not constantly looking to open the next restaurant. Yeah. Or open another business. That is not my vision. My vision is always, how can I do something that impacts community, and also be able to set standards and goals that my kids can look at and say, wow, I can do that too. Yeah. Right? It's the same thing, tapping back to what we talk about with what Canje is. Like, the thought of like, cool, I'm going to open that spot. But the bigger goal is the next person, the next Tavel that moved to Austin, and they Google Caribbean spot, they're not going to feel the way I felt. That's the big picture, man. Yeah. And it's not the restaurant. Yeah. It's what are we setting, the tracks that we're setting. And then the investor that says, I can invest in a Caribbean restaurant because the Caribbean restaurants are successful. Yeah. So I just gave the next person that's coming up a ticket to say this thing can work. And the people that have the talent and the people that have the resources can come together to create something special.
Creating something special is exactly what Tavel has done. If you haven't had the chance to go to one of his restaurants, I can't recommend it enough. And going back to what he said at the beginning, I think it's so important to really think about why we buy the food we do and how it makes us feel. Knowing that Canje sources its ingredients from both local farmers and also directly from Guyana is something that makes me feel good. It also helps that the food tastes incredible. And if we start to look at food and the local businesses we support with that lens of how does it make us feel and where is that dollar going, we'll start to make better decisions for the larger community we live in. I'm your host, Pat Killoran, and you're listening to Lone Startup.